Good afternoon, IT Business Owners Group. I am joined today with Nathan Ware. Nathan is the CEO and CTO for Rain Networks. Good afternoon, Nathan. Tell us a little bit about Rain Networks.
All right. Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me on, Scott. This is really fun to do this with you. You obviously have a fantastic Facebook group that you've put together over the years, so we're happy to be part of it. So yeah, who is Rain Networks? Well, we are a value-added distributor. We're located up near Seattle, Washington, and we represent brands mostly in the security space. So the brands that we represent would fit either under, like, say, the endpoint security umbrella, the email security umbrella, the email encryption umbrella. We do a lot of cybersecurity awareness training products now. That's fairly new for us the last few years as that market is kind of ramped up. And then we have a great data backup provider called Macram that we represent as well. We have a very small number of brands, so we're not like an Ingram Micro where we have this enormous, product line with thousands and thousands of SKUs. We represent about 12 different companies, but we're specialized, those 12 companies. So those companies that we represent, we have a high technical aptitude with their products. We mainly sell to managed service providers, so it's perfect for your group, since the core group of the ITBOG folks are MSPs. And generally what we're doing is we're helping them understand how these products work, how they can implement them at their customers. A lot of MSPs do things the same, but a lot of them do things different, right? So we really try to tailor how we give these products to these MSPs based on their business. How do they do their billing? What kind of customers are they servicing? Are they servicing, typical corporate customers, dental offices, or whatever? So we try to kind of wrap the solution to fit what they need so that it really works for them. Because in a lot of cases, when you're buying things like email security products or endpoint security products, you're almost buying more into a business model as much as you're buying into a technology. So you have to understand both pieces of it so that it fits your business. And so we do that a little bit better than your typical distributor, we like to think.
Well, that makes total sense. So, and you said something that I really like. You said something that we don't focus on having everybody. We want to have a small amount of people that we distribute for, and we're very well versed in those products. So
Yeah.
we can specialize in those products. That's excellent. So
Yeah, I mean, really, you kind of end up picking that in
yeah.
your walk of life, right? You're either a specialist or a generalist, right? And really, people kind of break down to those two categories, right? And we just kind of figured early on in the company that, it made sense for us to be a specialist because it was just kind of needed at the time. And it's worked out well for us. And you know what? There's a place for the generalists too, right? The Ingram Micros and the Tech Datas and those guys, they have a place in the world too. So we all kind of find our niche and run with it, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I was kind of thinking as you were saying that, a specialist and a generalist. So would a generalist be like an IT break fix provider and a specialist would be like an MSP? I don't know. Maybe that correlation could come through.
I
I
think a
don't know.
lot of I think a lot of MSPs are probably generalists too, because they need to know, Microsoft software,
Sure.
VMware, Dell hardware, HP hardware. They need to know all these different things, right? A specialist would be, maybe there's guys out there who like they just implement a certain type of accounting system,
Right.
right? So they learn this accounting software and they go find customers that want to implement this accounting software and they help them implement it, right? So that would be more like what I would think of, or like
Yeah,
dental software, right? I know you guys have
absolutely.
some ITBOG guys that are like dental specialists, right? So guys like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so how did you land in the position that you're currently in with Rain Networks? How did it all start
Yeah.
for you? What was your earliest experience as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, so, probably my earliest experience as an entrepreneur, if I go back a few years, boy, this feels like so long ago, Scott. It really doesn't. So I worked at Microsoft for
Okay.
3 years in the 90s. And then when I left Microsoft, I went to work for a company that I guess you would categorize them as a VAR, a value added reseller. They were kind of more popular in the late 90s. They're
Sure.
not as popular nowadays, but back in those days, we had VARs selling computers and that kind of thing. And at that time, I had a good friend who had invented a product, a really cool technology product. It was a vulnerability assessment scanner.
Okay.
And so he invited me to kind of be on his team developing this company, this brand new little startup. And so I kind of did this as a side thing as I was working for this VAR. And I got to see how he started his company and how he worked with venture capitalists and how he got his patents and all this stuff. And frankly, I thought it was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty
Okay.
neat. He ended up selling his company to WatchGuard. You guys know WatchGuard, the
Yeah.
firewall folks. He ended up selling his company several years later to WatchGuard, but it was kind of my first experience of like how a startup company works in the technology arena. And I did. I kind of thought it was kind of cool.
Cool.
So fast forward a couple years, we had like, I'm in Seattle, right? So you got to really kind of think of what things were like here. We had this big .com bust here where just companies were just starting up and dying like a year later, just as fast as they could
Wow.
go, right? And it was a wild time. A lot of the VAR businesses actually kind of died. It was a really weird time here, particularly in Seattle, given the type of business climate that we had here. And so we kind of felt like there was this opening in the market for a company like Rain Networks.
Okay.
It also kind of fit into the technology at the time. So Microsoft had released Windows XP in 2002. We started our company in 2003. And
Okay.
the antivirus world just exploded at that time, right?
Ah.
Windows XP was like the virus petri dish, right? I mean, it just malware just glued onto that thing like it was
I
meant to
think
be.
it still is.
It still is, right? So you had all these companies. Like our first distribution relationship
Okay.
was with Kaspersky.
Okay.
And at that time, so again, you got to like transport yourself back to that era, right? 2004, 2005, right? Like Kaspersky was this kind of, this new Russian company that's trying to sell software in the US, right? That's
Okay.
basically what they were. Symantec and your McAfee's were really the big dogs of that time. So here's Kaspersky. They were like, hey, we would like to build a reseller channel, and break fix shops were kind of their target audience, right? So, I mean, there was a time at Rain Networks where we had like tens of thousands of boxes of Kaspersky software. Remember when we used to buy software in boxes, Scott?
I think so. And they were really thick.
Yeah, they look like a little book or something, and then when
Yeah.
you opened it up and there was like a CD inside, like that was the early days of Rain Networks, right? We had like, I'm not kidding, tens of thousands of boxes. It was so ridiculous to think of that now, but that was our start. That was our start. And so when we
Okay.
were successful with Kaspersky, we thought, well, you know what, there's probably other security companies that are wanting to kind of get a US channel going. And so, AVG and Avast and Avira, ESET, who is, we're obviously in the IT business owners group with ESET. But yeah, I mean, it started with Kaspersky way back in the day. We had a Kaspersky master agreement, and it kind of showed us that the business model was was worthy, right? That there was a spot in the market, because at that time, like Ingram and Tech Data and stuff, like they didn't want to talk to Kaspersky. They were like,
Oh
who are
wow.
you guys? You guys, this little Russian company. Yeah, we're busy
Sure.
selling Symantec and McAfee and Trend and stuff like that, right? So yeah, that's kind of
So
how it all started.
what kind of obstacles did you face in the beginning in starting Rain Networks up? And when you had, like, I'm sure maybe the first one may be a little bit easy to handle, but then when you started adding on different vendors, what are some big obstacles that you faced?
Well, so the big obstacles is that every vendor had a little bit different plan.
Okay.
So we couldn't take one plan and then apply it to each one, because they all wanted to do different things. So we had to kind of be moldable. And, maybe they wanted to go after different kinds of customers, right? Like, Kaspersky wanted those break fix shops. Other guys wanted business customers. Other guys wanted service providers.
Sure.
Also the other thing that's interesting is if you think back to that period of time, if you would have come up to somebody in the year 2005 and said, hey, what's a managed service provider in 2005, right? Like, I don't even know if we had a real definition or if that was a real mainstream topic at that point. It may not have been. I can't remember that far
Sure.
back. But yeah, that was the obstacle, is that everybody had a little bit different kind of audience that they wanted to go after. So we had to kind of pivot to whatever they wanted to do.
Okay. So who has been the easiest company that you work with and you distribute for to take on and embrace the managed service provider realm?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, really, ESET, I would probably say is at the top of that list. I mean, if I look back now, right, we started working with ESET like, I don't know, 2006 or something like
Okay.
that was our initial, right?
So in the beginning.
Yeah, so we worked with Kaspersky, we worked with Avira, Avast, AVG, all these long list of AV providers back then, right? And a lot of them, frankly, have faded for one reason or another. And ESET along the way has just powered through, all the different challenges in the industry, and they have a very robust MSP offering that just keeps getting bigger and better every year. So I mean, I got to give them credit for that they've kind of molded to what the MSPs want. They've expanded the product line to what the MSPs are looking for. And so I would give them a lot of credit for that, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, it's interesting. It's an interesting topic because, even the service providers have changed. I have changed. When I first started my business, it was 100% break fix. I didn't know what a managed service provider was. I only learned what a managed service provider was through my own community IT business owners group. So,
Yeah.
I'm happy to say that we're actually a hybrid now. But over the past 2 years, we have implemented and have turned into a managed service provider. So, do you see, as the service providers evolve, do you see that the need for more companies like ESET to take on the roles of the managed service provider as well, to cater to that more so than traditional like antivirus, where you just buy it and you bought it for a year and then you have to renew it in a year?
Yeah, every year, Scott, I see like a complete transition away from
Mhm.
annual licensing and more to the monthly model.
Okay.
I could see, if we fast forward like 10 years down the road,
Hmm.
like the idea of buying an annual license, I don't want to say archaic, but I almost think unusual. You know,
Outdated.
yeah, maybe outdated is a good word for it. Cause I think of like where we were 5 years ago
Hmm.
and now where we are today. The pendulum of annual versus monthly has swung quite a bit in 5 years, right? So if that pendulum keeps swinging and we think forward, okay, what's going to look like in 2026? I think that pendulum is just going to keep swinging to the point where, annual licenses just dwindle, right? People want that flexibility, right? Especially in the US, right? We want flexibility, we want options, and we want to be able to change things on the fly, right? That's just kind of how we are in the US, which is, I'll tell you an interesting story, Scott, that this was a very interesting learning experience for me. I went to a convention, it was 3 years ago
Okay.
in Europe. And this convention had IT providers from all over the world. And so it was a good experience to kind of see how the rest of the world thinks, right?
Gotcha.
So there was actually an ESET presentation at this convention where the person that was presenting was like the head of the MSP division from their corporate office, which is in Europe. And so she's presenting to this room full of or I guess, I don't know if you call them, some of them were VARs or service providers or whatever,
Hmm.
but they're from, there's some from Africa, some from Asia, from literally all over the world, some from Europe. And she goes through their MSP program, and this guy, he asked the question at the end, and he's like, why would anybody buy a license on a monthly format? That seems like a ridiculous way to buy a license. The entire concept was foreign to this guy, right? And I was thinking, gosh, in the US, this is just how we do it. But the MSP model is pretty specific to the US in terms of how we do it. Other countries are way behind us from that standpoint. But I
Oh,
still
wow.
see that pendulum. It's going to swing big time to where the whole world, I think, is just going to go monthly eventually, which is, we've really structured our company around that because we think that's just going to become much more of a thing.
That makes total sense. And, I think the whole monthly aspect to things is, a very important analogy because, it not just in IT. any profession. If you can get your customers to continue to pay you on a monthly basis, even a smaller percentage than what you would make of the big one-time fee, you are capturing you're capturing that constant revenue that I like to call it mailbox money from the provider standpoint. So it only makes sense that the integrations from the antivirus companies and the tool providers that we use would do the same thing for us, because that way we're not having to spend the money up front and then sit on it until we gain it back over the course of 12 months from our clients.
Yeah, there's some key psychological factors to this as well. So first of all, when you have an annual license, so let's say you have a 2-year license that you buy of some software, right? It creates a natural breakup point, right? So it creates a natural time for you to go, oh, hey, my license is coming up. I've been using this product for 2 years. I should probably go evaluate some other options. It's like,
Right.
it's like a natural breakup time for us to go our separate ways. Where if it's monthly and it's just perpetually renewing, there's never that psychological moment where you go, oh, there's a term end date, right?
Right.
And so there's that, right? The other thing is from an MSP standpoint, when you have a monthly license, you can usually mold that license around your business a little bit better. Whereas if you're stuck in like a yearly contract, you have to kind of do it that way for however long that contract is, and you're just stuck. Maybe that doesn't work for you. Maybe the product is not working for you, but you're stuck with it, whether you like it or not. You cannot pivot. So, those are kind of the two things I think from a psychological standpoint that are pretty key to why monthly licensing is just taking over.
Well, and I can certainly appreciate that, because I'm sure you have struggled in, distributing the product licenses for the antivirus companies in the past that were renewed every year. You almost feel like you have to reach back out to your customer and resell it again. And nobody wants to be the salesman.
Right.
So no, that makes total sense. And
it's usually this really large chunk of money, right? So it usually feels like this big decision. So therefore you're going to enter the natural idea to come analyze this decision, because it's like this enormous chunk of money that we're giving up, right? Whereas when it's monthly, it's just kind of, hey, we're doing what we're doing, and if it's not broke, we're not going to fix what's not broke, right? So
that's right. No, I mean, I think that once you as a provider open up your eyes to the facts that you just said, that we just discussed about, around recurring revenue, and how there's no forced breakup, there's no stop and end date. That makes a lot of sense, because nobody wants to provide a service and then all of a sudden have it canceled or ended for any reason. So if we can keep and retain, I think a lot of the recurring revenue then revolves around customer retention as well.
Right.
So,
and at the end of the day, customer retention, I mean, I get this question from people ask us like, well, do we have a contract with you? Like if I buy ESET from Rain Networks, do I have a contract with you? Right. Do I have some kind of term on what Helto? I said, no, we don't have that, because the term that we have, the contract that we have, is that I'm going to do a good job for you. And when we do a good job for you, you're going to want to keep me around. And if I'm not doing a good job for you, you shouldn't keep me around, nor do I deserve to have you keep me around. And that's our contract.
Gotcha. Well, no, that's the best kind of contract. So, I mean, just you're holding yourself accountable.
Yep.
And that's key. Well, so outside of business, how do you continue to grow and be a great CEO and CTO to the Rain Network staff? How do you continue to be the best that you can be? Do you read any books or have listened to any podcasts in particular?
I do like podcasts. I'm not a huge book reader, probably because I have the attention span of like a 6-year-old child sometimes.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. So, but what I do love to read is, I'm a huge news guy.
Okay.
And so I love to read news. So I have a variety of news. I mean, I have all the, traditional ones that would just be like generic news, but there's a lot of technology news places that I like to read. I do keep up on like malware. There's a few malware research places that I kind of go to. I'm more of a news guy though. And I read a lot of news. I mean, a lot of news. And I kind of feel like that's probably one thing that gives us a little bit of a leg up, is we feel like we know what's going on in the industry.
Mhm.
Like there's been a lot of reading lately about, Colonial Pipeline and all that kind of stuff is
That's
fun.
right.
So, I mean, I find that stuff fun and exciting to read the same way that somebody might find like Tom Clancy fun to read or something, so.
Well, I'm sure that just helps you better position the distributors and the products that you're carrying, for your customers. If you
Yeah.
understand the landscape that well.
Well, and if somebody asked me like, hey, what do you like about the computer security, business, right? The network security business, what's cool about it? It's
Mhm.
that it's always exciting, right? There's always something cool going on. I
Sure.
mean, I hate to label something like Colonial Pipeline as cool, because that's probably not the right word for it, but it's never boring. Let's put it that way. There's always
Right.
something interesting happening. And so that keeps my interest, right? It's not just, I don't know, making machine parts or something. I would probably find that extremely boring. But yeah, there's always something cool going on in our industry to keep track of, and new and exciting things.
So tell me something big that your team has done at Rain Networks that makes you really proud as a leader. Any good
Well, yeah,
achievements?
okay. So I'll probably throw this out there just because it's ESET related, and we represent ESET at the IT Business Owners Group. But
Sure.
several years ago, there was a gentleman in ESET that kind of prompted us to get involved with their MSP program heavily.
Okay.
And at the time, we really weren't doing much of anything in their MSP program. Almost all the licensing that we were doing with ESET was annual. But he convinced me. He's like, "Hey, we're exploding here. This is your chance to get on the
Sure.
wave." And so we decided that's what we're going to do, right? And here we are, several years later. We're now their number one MSP distributor in the world, actually. So there's no
Excellent.
other company that distributes more ESET MSP licenses than Rain Networks, and we are proud of that. I mean, we've put a lot of work into that. We've kind of perfected our craft to try to get as good as we could in terms of making the process smooth for the MSPs,
Mhm.
making sure that they have all the info they need, training them how to use the management console, all that kind of stuff. We are pretty proud of that because we feel like we've done a great job of that. And it's been a successful business venture from an ESET perspective. They're happy as well, obviously. So it's good all around.
Well, if you could look into a crystal ball
Mhm.
and see the next 10 years, what do you think you see with Rain Networks and ESET?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm kind of tempted to say more of the same. You know, we're very ransomware focused these days in terms of putting together solutions for MSPs that help them, defend against ransomware at their clients, because that's obviously a huge topic. I don't think that's going away tomorrow. I don't
No.
think that's going away next year, that kind of thing, right? So if I said what's going to be different in 10 years, I'm sure there will be some new threat that we're not thinking of right now,
Sure.
and we'll respond to that when that happens. But I kind of feel like just getting better every day at what we're doing,
Great answer.
and it's little things, Scott. It's like the things that keep me up at night are probably the same things that keep you up at night. How can
Yep.
we be a little bit better at billing, right? Stupid stuff like
Yep.
that, right? How can we collect credit cards quicker and easier and more, pain-free for everybody, things like that. Like those are the things that I want to iron out, every little detail till it's just the best buying experience that we can create.
Well, going back to ransomware, how long have we had ransomware? Do you know when the first ransomware attack actually happened?
Oh, well, actually, so
When?
that's a funny story. It was like in the 90s. No kidding. The
Okay.
first actual documented ransomware, I think it was like early 90s, and it was done like on a floppy disk. I mean, and I'm not joking about
Oh,
that. That's
wow.
actually true. The first one I remember in terms of mainstream,
Okay.
gosh, again, I'm gonna probably screw up the years here, Scott.
That's okay. I don't know either.
2007. I want to say like 2007 was like the
Okay.
first time that I remember seeing something where like, wow, that's different. And I was like, remember there was all these FBI, you would get these startup screens where it would like take over the startup on your computer, and it would say like, the FBI has alerted us that there's some kind of nefarious activity going on, and then they wanted you to like Western Union some money. Like those are like the early ransomware. It's obviously gotten way more sophisticated since then because of Bitcoin. But yeah, I want to say
Right.
2007. That would be if I had to pull a year out. So that's like what, almost 15 years.
So I remember those, but I didn't think those were actually ransomware. The FBI that was I don't know, I don't know if it's the proper terminology, but I always called it like a browser hijack.
Well, so that's how they started. They started as a browser hijack, and then
Okay,
somebody along the way, like, kind of had this Western Union idea injected into it, to where we would basically like give you your computer back if you Western Union. But they were easily removed, and they weren't really like
sure.
encryption tools. It was more just like hijacking your startup more than anything, right? But still, I guess some flavor of ransoming something,
Yeah,
right?
the
Yeah,
ultimate goal was to extort money out of the end user.
right.
So absolutely, and and if you look at back at those days when it was as simple as just Control Alt Delete and forcing the browser down,
Yeah.
but a lot of end users didn't know that, so you had to have a certain level of computer savviness to get past that. Because I mean, God, I think that I've gotten more phone calls for that type of issue than an actual virus attack or malware attack from our clients. So
Yeah.
it was, and the good news is that's an easy thing to resolve. But just like everything, the threat actors are, you know they are growing their businesses too, and they are evolving in time. So if we don't evolve with them, then we get left behind, and we're done. We're out.
Yeah, well, one of the things I talk about this a lot is, I'm not really into Bitcoin per se. I don't own like a bunch of Bitcoin or whatever,
Sure.
but the price of Bitcoin does drive ransomware. As the price of Bitcoin comes up, the folks that make ransomware, they're a lot more motivated, right? It's like they just got a raise when Bitcoin goes up, right? I mean, if we all got 20%
Interesting.
raises, we'd all be a lot more motivated, right? Well, look at the price of Bitcoin and how it's expanded over just the last, 12 months or so. That's a raise that they got every time that they ransom your computer. The Bitcoin that you send them has just jumped in value significantly, right? So, Bitcoin changed everything in terms of that aspect of it. And I mean, Bitcoin's not going away, right? That's just going to get more popular, whatever you want to, more mainstream, whatever word you want to attach to it.
Sure. Well, I'm kind of like you. I don't do anything really with Bitcoin. I read a lot and I try to understand, but there's so many different flavors of cryptocurrency now. Dogecoin, I think, is the latest we've all been hearing about, and
Yeah,
I just try to keep up as best I can, but I certainly don't do any mining or anything like that. So,
I don't either. Yeah. Either,
so
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
what outside of the security realm, all
Mhm.
this is great, but what do you, Nathan, like to do as a hobby? How do you decompress? How do you have any hobbies that you like to do on a personal level?
Yeah. So I'm a huge football guy, Scott. Are you a football fan, by the way? We've never talked football. Are you a football
um
fan?
University of South Carolina, USC.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
We have a big
So out here on
rivalry
the
here.
West Coast,
Yep,
we call you guys the other USC
there
out
you
here on the
go.
West Coast. But yeah. Okay. So I'm a huge football fan,
Okay,
and it's really like a 12-month a year kind of thing for me. I don't like quit paying attention to football like in January. It's
gotcha.
like, I love the draft, and I'm a huge college football fan. So, that's like a 12-month a year recruiting and all that stuff. So football is a big thing for me out here. I'm, big into like exercise and working out, and I play golf. So, it's golfing season here out in the Northwest. So yeah, football and golf. Those are probably, if I had to list, like, what are my two hobbies, football and golf.
Okay, well, good
Yeah.
deal. Well, I do like football, but I really like the South Carolina and Clemson rivalry. So there's a
Oh
team
yeah.
here, a local Southeastern Conference team,
Yeah.
Clemson University, and then
Yeah.
University of South Carolina, and they are diehard rivalry.
Yeah.
It's been that way for as long as I've been a kid, so as long as I can remember. But people here in South Carolina are either diehard Clemson fans fans or they're diehard University of South Carolina fans. So
Yeah.
that's always interesting. And I think I get the most fun out of the games when we go tailgating at the Carolina games. So
Yeah.
that's always fun. But and
I
I
would
have
love to go to a game there someday. I mean,
oh
that's I love the
well.
Southeastern Conference stuff is obviously it's the best conference in football. So, yeah.
Well, we like to party, so we love to tailgate.
I
That's
hadn't
probably the
heard that,
biggest thing.
Scott. I had not heard that.
It is definitely experience to say the least. So
Yeah.
well, with golf, I'm not. I have to admit, I am not a good golfer at all. I like to go out and hit the balls, but I can't tell you where it's going to go, left, right, forward. Just not very coordinated in that way. But I do like to go out and take my son to the driving range and hit a couple
Oh
golf
yeah, that's
balls.
fine. That's
Yeah, it
cool.
is kind of cool. So
Yeah. How old is
um,
your son? How old is your
he
son?
he is 12 going on 40.
Well, 12-year-old kids, man, they pick up golf so fast, because they're so flexible and they can just move their body. When we're 12, we can do things we can't do when we're 45. So,
Absolutely.
golf is usually good for kids at that age. And there's a lot of kids that are 12 years old, man, they can just hit the ball a mile. So,
Yep. Yep. Well, I think my father took me out a couple times, and that's kind of where my golf began. But I did have when I was younger, my buddies, we all wanted to go out and play golf one day, and of course they were avid golfers, and we go out, and I think I was on maybe the second hole, and they asked me to kindly just drive the golf cart. So I don't know if you call that the ball boy or what, but yeah. So I always went to hang out, but for me it was more about just hanging out. I always got frustrated trying to get the little ball in the hole that was a long way away. So
So, for me, golf, part of it was just the whole coronavirus time, right? And especially up here
okay,
in the state of Washington, right? It's probably a little bit different than what you guys had in South Carolina. We had a lot stricter lockdown here, right? I mean, we had about
gotcha.
as strict a lockdown as anybody had in the country. And, we couldn't go anywhere, right? For
Sure.
a long period of time. And so it was like, well, what are we going to do? We're sitting here around the house, what can we do? Gyms weren't open, all that stuff, right? So, I mean, there was a short list of things that we could come up with. You could go for walks, right? But I mean, at some point that just gets to be monotonous, right?
Sure.
So like we were buying these nets and we could hit golf balls in our backyard.
Oh, okay. Kind of like a
And
soccer net, a little bigger
yeah,
though. Okay.
exactly. And so that was like how we just burned minutes during coronavirus quarantine was. And I also have a huge field out back of my house, like a big cow pasture.
Okay.
And I went to the store and I bought a wooden dowel and I put like a little construction flag on the top and I pounded it in the ground. And I would go back out in this cow pasture and hit like 100-yard, wedge shots like I was hitting into a
Oh, that's
golf ball.
awesome.
I kind of made my own little quasi green. And yeah, I mean, because during that period of time, man, I mean, literally everything was so locked down here. There was just nothing to do recreationally. And so you just had
Gotcha.
to kind of invent stuff. And so that was basically my invention for recreation. Buy a net and go hit balls out in the cow pasture.
Well, talking about Corona and COVID, how did I'll go back to your professional life.
Mm-hmm.
How did COVID and the whole pandemic, how did it affect Rain Networks and ESET?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I'll be honest, not as much as I probably would have guessed. If you would have
Okay.
asked me that question, like at the end of March of 2020, I would have said, "Oh boy, this is going to be a doozy," right? And
Right.
obviously, it was a doozy of a year in a lot of ways. But I really kind of thought, from a business perspective, it would probably have a lot more, negative ramifications for us than it did. I think some bigger projects were probably put off, but we were pretty resilient overall as a country, right? People were
Yeah.
keeping on the best that they could. And I think we probably did a pretty darn good job at the end of the day of, put one foot forward in front of the other. And, our business actually grew in 2020, which, like I said, if you had asked me in March of 2020, if that was going to be the case, I probably would have said, boy, I doubt it. But our
Right.
business actually grew in 2020. And we kind of have made it through I would assume we're through the worst of it, Scott. So
Oh, I
knock
hope
on
so.
wood, knock on wood.
Yeah, I
And
hope so.
yeah,
Whew.
yeah.
I don't
But
know how
now,
much more
we're
of that I
starting
could
to see
take.
things getting back and going, right? I mean, like
Yep.
Black Hat's going to happen in Las Vegas first week of August. Trade shows are kind of spinning back up. It's you know,
And we're
yeah.
actually going to try to have our cruise in 2022, the ITBOG
Cool.
member cruise.
Awesome. That's great. I mean, that's
We're
great, man.
excited
That's
about
great.
that. We're planning that, and we had actually gotten a good bit of planning done prior to the pandemic, and then the pandemic just kind of squashed our plans. So,
Yeah.
and we
Well, you
wanted
and
to
a lot
have
of
it.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we wanted to have it in September of this year, but the Florida ports opening up kind of postponed that, and we just figured it would be best just to go ahead and push it out one more year. But
Yeah.
what when we plan, take a good long time to plan, that should just produce the best event possible. So we're
Yeah.
excited about that.
Well, I
But
traveled for work last week,
yeah,
and I was in the airport, and I'm telling you, it was humming. It was as
it was
if
packed.
it was like it was pre-coronavirus activity at the airport. I mean, it was lines and people all over the place, and yeah, I mean, everybody
That's
still was
great.
wearing masks, but it felt very normal, and the
So I
planes
haven't
were
flown
packed.
yet since the pandemic, but so you said everybody's wearing masks. Do they make you wear a mask in the airplanes now as well, like the whole
It,
trip, even if you've been
yeah,
vaccinated?
yeah. I mean, you have to wear a mask from like the second you walk into the airport.
Ah, okay,
Yeah, and I don't know when that's ending. I don't know what the federal government's doing on that standpoint. And then yeah, you have to wear a
sure.
mask, all the way through the flight. Obviously, if you're going to eat or drink something, you can take it off. But yeah, if you're just sitting in the airplane, you're wearing a mask.
Okay. Well, no, that makes total sense then. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. One last question I have for you. Any parting words of advice for the audience?
Wow. I don't know. I don't know that I got any wonderful pearls of wisdom. I mean, your group, Scott. I mean, you got a bunch of smart people on your group, right? I don't know. My pearls of wisdom for the group would be: we have the 4th of July coming up in what
Yeah.
here, 5 days or whatever, and to me, it feels like a little bit more of a special 4th of July, because it kind of feels like us coming out of this last year of
Yes.
craziness, right? So it
Absolutely.
feels like a special 4th of July. So my words of wisdom would be: spend some extra time with your family and
Yep.
enjoy this holiday a little bit more than maybe you would have otherwise, because it's a great holiday.
I love it. That's a great way to end it. So Nathan, thank you so much for taking the time to have this fireside chat with me. I've really enjoyed it. And one last thing, if someone wants to get in touch with you and figure out how they can how they can start reselling ESET in their managed service provider, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, so probably just use our support alias. So support@rainnetworks.com is kind
Okay.
of the catch-all. We will get that to either a salesperson, accounting person, wherever, you can send a message to support@rainnetworks.com and we'll get it to somebody, right? So that's probably the best way. So yeah, if you're interested in the program, looking at the different options that ESET has from a product perspective, or any of our brands, just reach out to us at support@rainnetworks.com. We'd love to work with you. We work with MSPs all over North America. So we have a huge Canadian reseller base as well. And so, yeah, we would love to work with as much of the ITBOG guys as possible. We love all the folks that we met on ITBOG. You got a great group, Scott. You really do.
Thanks, Nathan. We really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today.
All right. Thanks for having me. Let's do this again.
See ya.
All
Bye-bye.
right. See ya.